I want to call up our first father-daughter team, Loveleen Sidhu and Jay Sidhu, if you guys would come up here. Dr. Kiran Patel, philanthropist and chairman of Freedom Health. And once again, Vicente Fernandez, co-founder of Sportsmania, which he co-founded with his mother. And your moderator, Santosh. I'm sorry, I'm gonna... Govindaraju, CEO of Convergent Capital Partners and entrepreneur who said he learned a lot from his own father. So I'm really looking forward to this discussion with you all.
All right. Well, academia today is investing a lot of resources in studying what is the secret sauce of success. And while the research is, stimulating, I found that there's nothing better than to hear it up close and personal with successful entrepreneurs. And today, right now, we're going to get personal with these folks who've all had various successes. And I think you've heard of some of them already today. But the goal here today is to really understand what is that secret sauce and how have you shared it and passed it on. So my first question is, what was the first experience, hurdle, or challenge that you overcame in your journey towards entrepreneurism that you think budding entrepreneurs should know? Is there an experience that's memorable to you?
Yeah, so the very first, and as an entrepreneur, a young entrepreneur, I have a lot of friends who want to start companies. And I would say like every 2 weeks, I get on the phone with one of my friends and they pitch their ideas. And a lot of the ideas are really good. And a lot of these guys are really smart. But none of them, not one, has actually launched the companies that they've had the ideas for. And one of the biggest challenges they find is finding the team around them. A lot of them don't have the technical experience. They have a difficult time finding developers. So I think the first challenge is really just getting off the ground and building a product by finding the right team member. The other thing, that we experienced personally at Sportsmanias, and we discussed it a little bit on the first panel I was on, was legal issues. So we're curating content, and we weren't sure whether the publishers we're curating content from were going to hate it or they were going to love it, because we're driving them more traffic, but we're also taking their content. And thankfully, the first time we got on a call with the managing editor at the Boston Globe, he loved it. So, we moved forward despite the risk, and we were rewarded for it.
Yeah. So it's a hard question for me to answer because in many ways, somehow or other, things fell in place when I did things. Now, whether that was luck or talent will be judged by other people. But early on in field of medicine, I was thinking things that nobody had thought before in our time. In 80s, when managed care came in, I started seeing patients that people didn't want to see simply because of their insurance. So the first point was, my job as a physician was only to see the patient and take care of them regardless of their form of payment. That part led me to an opportunity of taking care of this population. The second stage, which was very difficult, is how can somebody that has just come out of residency, who does not have any money, can start an insurance company? And it so happened that in the town, there were 27 physicians who started an insurance company, were about to go bankrupt. And I took on that insurance company, more or less like a lease purchase agreement, so that I suggested to them, I'll take all their liability, which was $1 million, and I'll take over the company, and I'll pay them back in 5 years, 50 cents on the dollar of their investment. So I did creative financing. I was bold enough to make some decisions. I was able to clean up the company and start that and build it up ultimately to $1 billion revenue company. So that experience and that courage that I took and steps I took led me in many, many occasions to do some things. There is lack of time, so some other time I'll share more about what happened.
Well, thank you for inviting me over here. First of all of you who are first-generation immigrants, you are absolutely world-class entrepreneurs, because to go and move to another country and make something out of yourself, please give yourself a round of applause. Yeah. I'm, of course, a first-generation immigrant and an entrepreneur. I was a rebel from day one since I was born. My mom and dad tell me anything that they ever wanted me to do, I did something opposite. And it was, they wanted me to become a doctor because they believed that's the only way to achieve success. And I left the college where they admitted me to a pre-med program and said, send them in India those days, you had to send telegrams, which reached to the, my father was in the army, which reached up to there in Shillong after about a couple of days. I said, left, pre-med, joined business program. And that was like, oh my God, this guy is never going to make any money and he's never going to be successful. I wanted to travel around the world. So when I was at BHU doing my bachelor's in business management, which was the first program ever done, I wanted to travel the world. So I went out and said, I'm going to hitchhike, because we used to see kids come in from UK and United States and Canada, and they used to hitchhike through Benares in Varanasi. I said, what the hell, if they can do it, I can do it too, you know? And so we were one of the first ones to really go out and hitchhike all over Europe and when we came back, and we had no money with us, of course, but when we came back, we had $100 in our pocket after traveling for 3.5 months. That was the best entrepreneurial education you can ever have. Okay, so it's just another example. So again, I was given an opportunity after graduating from college, where I already had the job, but somebody said, you know, you can, be in a management training program in a bank or something like that. And I said, what are your aspirations? And to make a long story short, I had an opportunity to work in a little bank which was failing, and we converted that into the 17th largest in the United States, called Sovereign Bank. And then after I left Sovereign, it was another, I don't know why, but I couldn't stand playing golf in Florida. It's boring to do it more than once or twice or 5 days, you know? It's much better to come in, fly in over here and do that. So we started another company. And my daughter can talk about how she is taking it to the next level.
So in terms of a hurdle, I remember back when I was probably 13, 14 years old, and I would make annual trips to India. And it would always just like hurt my heart to see all the people suffering around me, people without homes, without medical attention, etc. And at that point in my life, I knew that whatever I wanted to do in life, I wanted to impact people's lives. So as I shared this morning, I thought I wanted to be a doctor. So I thought that the way that I could help these people that I saw on this trip was to raise money and organize medical camps. So I was literally 14 years old, and I had to have the opportunity and the grit or the perseverance to actually raise money for this. Then I went to Fortis hospitals in India, looked for volunteer doctors, volunteer organizations that could help sponsor these camps, and I ended up sponsoring between 8th grade and my senior year in high school 6 camps in India to give people medical attention that I really believe they deserved. Yeah. So from this, I thought that, as a young child, that was a hurdle in my eyes. And to be able to have a vision and to work towards implementing it and executing it sort of gave me the confidence of, my entrepreneurial journey today.
Some great insight, so we hear about the importance of team building, being creative, not worrying about whether you have the money or not, being a rebel, and, finding challenges at a young age to overcome are all interesting qualities that you guys have shared. Getting a little more personal into your own lives, and as Roshni alluded to, we all care about, what piece of advice can we pass on to our children, some meaningful things. if you can reflect in your own lives, what's a piece of advice that you'll remember that you received from your parents or that you pass on to your children that you'll always treasure and remember?
So my mom's not here today, but she's my co-founder at Sports Manias. And it's funny, growing up, I did not envision myself being an entrepreneur. I envisioned myself, and I love sports media, so either being a sports writer or documentary filmmaker. And I guess subconsciously, I was being influenced by an entrepreneur in my house, which was my mom. She had an advertising agency, and every day after school, I would go into her advertising office, which is now our Sports Manias office, and I would work and do my homework while she was working. And she would work late hours, and I would work late hours on my homework. And when the opportunity came to start a business together, the habits that she had as an entrepreneur were already ingrained in me. So when we were complementing each other in a way that we were both running at it together with the same sort of relentlessness that I always saw in her from the time I was in elementary school, to the relentlessness that she still has today and that I think she's passed down to me. So for me, she always told me growing up, do what you love. And I knew where I wanted to be because of that. And the second thing was to work hard and be relentless for that vision that I had and what I wanted to do because of my passion.
So, like many of us, I also came up from a modest upbringing. I was born in Africa. My father was a very hardworking person, and his work ethics were tremendous. And that's what was passed on to me. I'll just say a couple things that I did for my son. When he was 8 years old, once he came from the school and said, "Dad, am I rich?" I said, "Why are you asking that?" He says, "Everybody in the school tells me, and I just bought a Lamborghini that day." So, say, "You have a Mercedes, your parents both are doctors, and you have Lamborghini." So I responded to him that I am rich, you are not. The second part that I think was something when he finished his college, he did at Babson and came back to me, and I said, "I will only take you on under one condition. If you are willing to eat, breathe, sleep, and drink this profession or job that you do, then you can be with me. If you want it to be a part-time, then I don't want you." I also started him with a very low-scale salary to start him up in a company as a newcomer. And a story that comes in mind is his cousin had a surgery done on his eyes, LASIK. And when my wife asked my son, "Mom, why are you not getting LASIK done?" Then he said, "It's not in my budget." And that, I think, told me that the way I brought him up was good. And then Mom paid for his LASIK surgery. So I think not spoiling the children, making them understand the value of money and hard work is something that I feel important that my parents taught me that I try to pass on to my children.
Yeah, a lot of wisdom in that, and had similar situations. That's the way we try to raise our kids, but we weren't always perfect parents. But when I was young, and I give you an example about the hitchhiking trip to all over Europe, and we had to go through Afghanistan and Iran and fly over Pakistan and whatnot because Indians couldn't do that. My mom said, "No way, beta, no way." Okay, and my father was a colonel in the army, and my dad just asked me a series of questions. How are you going to go? How are you going to do this? What if you're going to get a trail? What are your plans? How are you going to communicate with us? How are you going to get the visas from there? And why should they give you a visa? What are your plans? And how are you going to convince the British High Commission to give you a visa first? Because that was our plan. Get that first and then tell them we're just traveling. over there. So my dad taught me different things. Being a very organized, very thorough, very good planner, and go ahead. If that's what you want to do, go right ahead and do it. When I wanted to come to the United States to go to school, we come from a very, very middle-class family. And my parents could not afford to send me to college. And so it was again, my dad said, if you can manage it yourself, I'd encourage, because the best investment one can make in your children is education. And so he says, I'll buy you the ticket, because whatever it takes. But after that, I wish I could, but I can't. So I applied to 45 different schools in the United States with a little essay saying why I can't afford to pay your application fee. Right? I've been invited to speak at Wharton, speak at Harvard. Those two schools never responded. But thank God my kids went there, So, and a little school, small school called Wilkes University, where now we've endowed a business school, responded and said, that's interesting. We haven't had an application which somebody says they can't even afford. And that, to me, was an encouragement, again, by the parents to go ahead, search for a way, think through, plan it. If that's your passion, go ahead. Try to achieve it. But that came from my dad, not from my mom, unfortunately. But mom developed other types of skill set. So I'll let Loveleen tell me.
So one thing that I've always heard my dad say, and it always sticks in my mind, is tough times don't last, tough people do. And it's this undefeated spirit that I think really gets you to be successful in your personal life and in your professional life. I think that challenges, I think I said it in the morning as well, the other thing I hear him say, challenges, view them as an opportunity. And it's so true, because we cannot live life without challenges. We just cannot. It's impossible. So why not view them as opportunities? Why not view them with an undefeated spirit? And that's the way that you're going to transform challenges truly into opportunities. So that's definitely one thing that stays in my mind. And number two is, he always says to me, be the bestest. I don't even think that's a word. But, and it just instilled in me that what I'm competing with every day is myself. So to be a better version of myself every single day, that is my goal, to feel that I'm wiser, stronger, happier each and every day, and Dad helped instill that in me.
That's great. Academia today is using the word grit. Many of you are, describing what they're trying to form as this whole theory of psychology is grit, the grit factor, and so it's amazing to see that come in all of you. Last question I have before we go to the Q&A is, as you've grown in your experiences, what are the most important principles of business that you employ as you look at new opportunities and business ventures?
So one thing that has become very important, obviously as a company, we believe in our vision and we feel like we have a strong grasp of the marketplace of digital sports media, but being data-driven is really more important than ever. I mean, we have more tools at our disposal than ever before. So as we evolve as a company, as we make new product advances, it's really important to be looking at the numbers as well as the insights that we feel we have qualitatively. And that's something that's become more prevalent as we've evolved as sports manias is, gut is great, but you have these tools at your disposal, and it's really about balancing those two to drive the best business possible.
What was that question?
Oh, sure. So are there, as you've grown in your entrepreneurial experiences and you're looking at opportunities that other entrepreneurs are bringing you, are there certain principles of business that you employ on a regular basis as a checklist, perhaps, as you look at opportunities?
So first, I think knowing the business is important for me. but I have sprinkled in many, many places. So I have been more of a gut type, evaluating the opportunity and the risk versus benefit. I am also what my family or many people will call me a deal junkie. So I've done many, many types of deals. Majority I've been successful in, and of course there are failures that people may not know about. But when I look for quality, I'm looking at the person more than anything else. If I find that the person is genuine, honest, talented, and able to get somewhere, I would do it. Along with that, of course, the risk of the capital will be weighed as to the exposure I'm putting myself into. But I feel that looking at the character of the person that is driving the business is I think the maximum weight I would put on deciding whether I'm going to partner with that party or not.
The things that come to my mind are first, you must have a clarity of your vision, your dream. Without that, chances are you'll get somewhere, and that somewhere may not be where you want to be. And then it's all about execution, and execution is people. You got to always hire the best and fire the lousiest quickly. And it's easier said than done, but majority of the time, it's sort of like you say, well, this person is such a nice person, this and that. So there's a conflict. But when it comes to business, you got to be absolutely laser focused on an authentic self-assessment. And we call it in our company Ambassador of Internal Affairs. That is, have totally engaged team members, be brutally honest, brutal facts, and really reward speaking up and difference of opinion. And don't surround yourself with yes people, but that always happens is that you got to compliment the ones who disagree with you. Behaviors are absolutely critical. Another thing is that you got to be what we call internally a master of the external environment, that you got to know what's happening in technology and outside the world and among your customers, regulators, which obviously I come from a darn ridiculously regulated business, that you got to know as much, if not more than all your constituents. So we have what we call a role of a leader in our company. It's absolutely clearly defined. It doesn't matter what role you have, and that's the way it is. It's your expectation of a leader. And then you got to be passionate about it, and the highest level of integrity, and integrity is unquestionable. There is no such thing you can sort of trust someone a little bit. Either you do or you don't. So those are some of the principles you sort of learn through making a boatload of mistakes.
I think the way that I try to make business decisions is always putting myself in the shoes of the customer. So I think that as we're moving more and more into a technology world, the power is becoming more and more in the hands of the consumer. And so even internal functions, whether it's operations, business development, marketing, risk and compliance, it needs to be taken into consideration with always putting the customer's perspective first, because that's how you're going to win at the end, if you're able to connect with the customer. And so that's kind of the way that I think about it.
Well, I think we have time for one or two questions. If you would, maybe direct it to a specific panelist.
Dr. K or Mr. Sidhu, the question is, when you have your family member, your son or your daughter working with you in the same project or maybe a different project which you may discuss or you may have some interest as an investor or maybe a passive investor or advisor, how do you handle conflict when it arises in the family, outside the family, in the office, or at home? Because that's something which I think at some point you might have faced it or you are going to face it when you work with your own blood working together.
The good part or bad part of having your own family member is they will be a little bit bolder than your employee because they have the right to say something. So I think just like it was mentioned, as long as that argument or criticism can be analyzed and debated, it is good. So my point to you is, at least in my case with Shilan, there are certain rules that I have also set up front. But the discussion and debate can be there, but the final decision will be made by me, at least at this time. So after evaluating a lot of things, naturally I would think because of my age and my experience, the decision I will make will have some common sense to it.
What if they don't share their decision with you and they make the decision? I mean, that's where the real conflict comes, that you come to know later that this is the decision made and he didn't consult with me.
Let me tell you, money is a very powerful tool. I believe at this stage in life where he is still dependent on my funding, that conflict may not occur unless he is very rebellious type that might walk away and do something. But in all honesty, that type of dispute will only come when somebody can independently, if he believes strongly in something. Say, in my case, if my son really believed in something that was totally diverse from what I am forcing him to do, and if he had the means, he would do it, right? So it's a hypothetical scenario, but in my case, I feel very comfortable and confident that we are very, very much in sync. He does bring issues that are sometimes sensible. The way we built the company was in a far different way than the second generation has. We had to bootstrap, we had to do things that they will never have to do it and may not do it. So there is a big difference. We would have stayed in 2 people in 1 cubicle if necessary. Now they want to talk about image, this, that, other, because they have the luxury of doing it. So there is a difference, but there is not a major conflict that at least I have experienced in our case.
All right, I think we're out of time right now, so let's give a round of applause for